Hello and welcome to the Business of Data podcast. My name is Catherine King and I'll be your host. Welcome to season 3. It's absolutely lovely to have you joining us. In this series, we will be talking to executives and thought leaders from a range of industries, departments and functions, all about their passions, experiences and challenges within data and analytics. Let's go ahead and dive straight into today's episode. Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Business of Data podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about cloud modernization, specifically how to move an entire company to the cloud while maintaining business excellence and operations and managing that change effectively. Now, to do all of that and to chat about this really exciting topic, I have brought in Alan Crane, who's the AVP and Head of Information Management for USAA. Hi there, Alan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Catherine. How are you today?
I'm doing brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, for those of you who perhaps haven't had a chance to meet Alan before, just a few intro facts before we dive into this discussion. Alan has worked within USAA since 2007 in various roles from e-business through to research and analytics. Now, Alan is the Assistant Vice President and Head of Information Management for the P&C department. And I like to always dive into the person that we're chatting about. Now, Alan loves building furniture, and if you stepped into his house, you'd see a number of his handcrafted pieces, from a dining room table and the cabinets. And if he's not busy in the workshop, you'll find him out in the wilderness camping with his young son. Goodness me, that sounds mighty interesting.
Well, thanks. Family time is really important, and the project of our dining room table was all about family together and making a space big enough to bring our large family, when we could get together, and will at some point in the future be able to again, and then spending time with my son who's a scout. So it's great to be able to enjoy these times. They go too quickly.
Absolutely, that is. I don't have children myself, but I'm constantly being told by friends that if I do ever choose to have children, to savor every single moment because they fly by far too quick. So it's definitely something I've heard before. Yeah. I'm keen to know, Alan, with a hobby and skill like woodwork and carpentry, I'm assuming, given that 2020 has not always been the year of being able to go out and do normal things. Have you been able to do a little bit more inside the workshop than you perhaps usually would? And have you made any interesting items since the dining room table?
Oh yes, my wife has taken full advantage of me working from home and being around. And if it's not me, it's somebody else doing various things that needed to be caught up on. There was a great meme, I think, to say, my garden before COVID was all disheveled, and my garden after, and there's a pool and a fountain and and we're probably some form of that, just being able to beautify and there's, I think that's part of the upside, I think, within all of this, so you got to look at the silver lining with offer you. So
absolutely. I mean, for myself and my other half, we had raised beds for the first time this year, so we were out planting vegetables as well. So
nice.
I completely hear what you're saying there about taking advantage of things that we probably wouldn't have got around it to in the year. Awesome.
Well, I'll have to pick your brain for gardening advice, because I'm an absolute failed gardener.
Well, everyone here at Cranium is
gardening is not my thing.
Everyone here at Cranium seems to have a green finger, because I must admit we saw some fantastic photos being shared. But we've digressed massively, and I know my team are going to be listening to this podcast thinking this is not about carpentry or gardening. Catherine, get back onto the topic, and it's a very exciting topic, being that all about cloud modernization. Now, I believe it is a journey that you've been on yourself for a couple of years now, and I think it'd be helpful to the audience if you could start out by telling us what sparked the beginning of this transformation for you.
Well, we've been on this journey for probably about 5 or 6 years now, and a lot of those early efforts really centered on security, specifically information security, privacy, protecting our members. I mean, after all, we are an insurance company, and our bread and butter is how we manage risk. So we tend to be very risk averse. So early discussions around the cloud were kind of spooky for us. We certainly weren't the early adopters. It gave us a really late start in that process. Watched a lot of other people go through the process, before we dipped our toe into that. But I think it was really out of concern for our membership and the longevity of our company, and wanting to make sure that, if this is a big decision we're going to take, we need to take it wisely. And but now we're fully committed to a cloud first strategy, which is a pretty big deal and a pretty big change in a nearly 100-year-old company.
Absolutely. So when you were starting out this journey for you, what were the biggest challenges that you could just see that were going to be in your pathway, and how did you then overcome those?
I think once we got past the security portion of it, then it really became down to the scale and complexity. Like I said, our company is nearly 100 years old, and all of our systems are so interconnected. We realized we couldn't just migrate pieces of our system to the cloud. I mean, we could just do a copy paste of our data warehouse, but we wouldn't really get the real-time capabilities if you still have your legacy systems populating your warehouse, in a different location, for example. So really take full advantage of what the cloud had to offer. We really needed to rethink about all of our systems, the core policy systems, the core claim systems, pricing systems, billing systems, and then of course all the data that flows through all of those different systems, the operational data and the analytical data, to the cloud. So it really became the biggest challenge was, how do we get our arms around the scale and complexity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so interesting that you say there that there could have been an easier route for you in a sense of copying and pasting that data warehouse, but having that awareness that sometimes the easiest pathway isn't always going to be the best, and further down the line you probably wish you would have done it the correct and best way first time. So that's really, really interesting. Now
that's right.
Touched on such a great point there that actually USAA is an old 100-year-old company, which you're going to be, I think it's probably fair to assume you're going to be dealing with a lot of data and moving a lot of data. So where do you even begin with that process? Where is that mystical, does it even exist? Where is that starting line?
I think it goes back to planning. There's an old saying that says, he is a fool who begins to build a tower without planning the cost. And so planning was really key, especially when we're talking about the scale of all of the different systems that had to be retooled to fit in. So we spent a year just in planning, because this wasn't just a, what we call a lift and shift exercise or a copy paste migration from one place to another. We were retooling the foundation, in our strategy, which means all the feeds going in and coming out of our systems. So all that gets down to very, very low level data mapping, metadata management, those things that historically have been done in the back office or down in the basement of the building. Those have become the front and center pieces of our data strategy, making sure you get the foundation right so that you can build on that for the future.
Absolutely, and that is a theme that we have heard. Obviously, we're now appearing in season 3 of the podcast, but when we were producing season 2 and 1, it's probably fair to say this foundation knowledge is certainly more and more executives are saying it now. I think there's often been that pressure to talk about the newest, fanciest technology, and it's really exciting to do these things. But I think there's actually a growing culture to say, right, we've got to get the foundations correct, like you've just said there, before we can touch the really exciting technologies, the AI and the machine learning, the cloud. And actually that's what needs to come first. Now, right. I recently attended a really fantastic event put on by the Crinium over in the events side, and one of the thought leaders said that very much what they were doing was building the plane whilst they were flying it. And I must admit, when we caught up prior to this episode, that's what really sprung to mind for me. And I know that you told me before we press record here today that there was no way on earth that business could just stop whilst you transitioned the cloud. You weren't able to say, right, everyone, down tools for a week or a month, we need to make this transition. It's very much that you had to keep going. So how did you ensure that business continuity throughout this migration?
Yeah, I love that visual image, but the more I think about it, I think what we're doing is actually even harder than building the plane while it's flying. We're building a new plane in the sky that has to fly faster and higher than the one that we're already in. Yeah. And then once we get that other plane flying, we got to get all the passengers off of this plane onto the new plane while it's still in the air. Very real sense, I talk to my boss about this all the time. We are building a brand new insurance company, but one that already has 8 million members.
Yeah.
So building one that can fly faster, higher, and then move all those members and customers, from one to the other is really the task ahead of us.
Absolutely, and especially during turbulent times that we're currently experiencing now. With
Right.
whatever you're looking at in terms of more than just the pandemic and COVID era, but the wider things that are going on with the financial market and recessions and things like that. This is
That's
already
right.
quite a crazy time. Add on that transformation as well, and golly gosh, don't you have a huge task on your hands? So I don't envy you at all, but it certainly is exciting for this podcast episode. I will say selfishly. Now, I'm keen to know, when it comes to these conversations, I always like to offer a chance to impart a bit of wisdom, and I want to say learn from mistakes, because that sounds harsh, but what have been the main lessons that you've learned, at least from this experience, that you would perhaps tell another person who's perhaps at the beginning of their own journey to this migration?
I think the biggest thing is, well, first, I'll say that this answer assumes that you're doing more than just a copy paste version to the cloud. If you're doing that, that's pretty straightforward. You can set up a website in 5 minutes, on the cloud if you want to. I mean, if that's what you're doing, that's not what my answer is pertaining to.
Yeah.
But if you're doing large scale, massive, company-wide migration from on-premise legacy systems into the cloud, looking at establishing those pipelines, converting all these systems over, the most important thing in my mind is the support starts at the top. There are lots of reasons to not go to the cloud if you're a big company. You don't have to look very far. People are afraid of taking that risk. A lot of the people that are on the journey with you, assuming it is a multi-year journey, they probably won't even be with the company by the time it launches, if you think about that. So the reality is, you've got to get people that care, and the most important people to care about this are those at the very top, and because they're the ones that are going to help you, get this support and carry it forward when everyone else is saying no, when everyone else is saying not ready, not yet, not me, because you've got to pull all of these pieces together, and a lot of those are pieces that you can't control. So, doing what we are doing, is kind of like logistically similar to putting a man on the moon. And if you don't have that level of support from the top, you really won't be successful.
Yeah.
You can't do this scale with a grassroots effort or from one department to another.
Absolutely.
And if I could just offer, the other piece of advice is, if you haven't gotten started on a cloud journey, get started. Do it sooner and do it faster. Get that support earlier. If we had done that earlier, perhaps today we would be talking about a post-cloud migration strategy, and conversation, as opposed to a cloud migration discussion. But if we are talking here in a year, we'll have some good news stories about what we've been able to accomplish and what we've been able to see that's different than it was today.
Absolutely. I'm loving all these analogies. Flying planes, man on the moon. It's a very colourful and visual episode, this one. And actually, I think there's something to be said for what you were saying earlier about the transition of the passengers on the plane, because I think that makes sense. Very few passengers are going to go, yes, Alan, I'm really excited about moving planes onto this very new, exciting model that hasn't been, necessarily tested in the company before. I absolutely trust you to shift me over. And in many ways, I think a lot of companies experience that same sort of legacy thinking and potential pushback. Quite rightly, it looks dangerous. Are there security risks? What's going on? And then the wider cultural impacts of that, of what we hear, all these scary stories. I'll preface that by saying I think 2020 has been the year that has made the cloud seem more secure, because so many people have had to go to it this year, especially. But what was your reaction, being that you are in that 100-year-old company? Legacy systems, were they accompanied by legacy thinking? What was your reaction that you received when you said, right, we're going to move to the cloud, this is going to start as of next week, we're going to start this transition? Was it a different reaction that you received from the C-suite compared to that wider business?
Maybe initially there was, especially when we were talking more about security.
Mm.
But we got through that. I think the reality was we knew that, we're an insurance company. At the end of the day, we're a commodity, right? And so we know that, we can't just be comparing the experience that we give our membership to other companies like us. We know that, you know, people have got their expectations are being set by, Google like search ease, uh, Amazon like and Facebook like recommendations. I personally I bought more shoes off of Facebook than stores in the last few years. So it's, being able, and who would have thought that, 4 or 5 years ago. So I think the it was the expectation of our membership that helped to drive us to transform, and we just can't get there from where we are right now, and that the cloud was really going to be our key enabler. Then the question was, it changed from, why should we, to how can we? And I think that was really the pivotal moment, and we needed to, and that we could start putting, pen to paper and say, how do we lay out the plan to help us get there? And what's it going to take to do that? How do we see ourselves clearly on this journey so that we can build it right for the next 100 years?
Absolutely. And I think what you've said there is so interesting. Because very often when we talk about transformations and innovations, whatever we're talking about, there's generally two schools of thought that you need to have: either internal champions that support you, or a really good, strong case study to say, look at the success we've had here, let's make it bigger. But what you've added into this mix is actually, just as you say, consumer expectations. It's no longer oh, it would be nice to have, or compared to other people, it's we expect this now because this is the wider culture. And actually, that is your case study, is that your consumers
That's right.
and people buying into your products are actually just, point blank expect it, and don't even question it anymore. It's just set there as the baseline. So that's a really, really interesting and very fresh take on transformation.
That's right. And you talked a little bit about, AI and machine learning and those things that are enabled by the cloud. The things that we want to do for our membership can only be enabled by the cloud. We recently deployed a technology where you can take a picture of your car if you got into an accident or a fender, and we, using AI and machine learning, we can predict and assess all, not just what happened to the car, but all the things that, like, underneath that fender that it might have hit. Did you bend the axle? Did you bend the wheel? Did you break the electrical system behind it and those sensors? And by looking at all of those things, we're able to give you basically help you with those repair costs, to include the total cost of that repair, and all through just a click of a button on your phone. And so those are the kind of things that these kind of innovations are driving. Same thing with, cars that are, using a lot of sensors. It's not just the fact that they're helping to park themselves, but all that information is going to the vendor of those cars, the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer of those cars, that then being made available to others. It can be used to reinforce good driving habits, for example. It can be used to, help with, assessing things like crime rates in your city and risk of those types of things. So, insurance is definitely in the focal point of big data when it comes to all these different potential feeds, like weather and crime and statistics and neighborhoods and speeds and velocities and kinds of cars, not to mention all the different types of people that are behind those wheels. So it's a fascinating time to be, I think, in an old company, if you will, because it's really helping to see the art of the possible, and which is really enabled by cloud technology and sensor-based technology.
Absolutely. And then furthermore, I mean, if I was to say my one big prediction for 2021, something that I'm going to see as a trend increasing, is how close data analytics and the customer experience are becoming. Those two departments are slowly but surely merging. And you think about what you just said there with the AI capabilities in an accident. At the very least, an accident is a minor inconvenience to your day. It's going to be a bit frustrating, through to being severely traumatic. The last thing you
Yeah.
want to be doing with your insurer is filling out tons of forms, asking stupid
Yeah.
questions that you think, please just know. And to think that the cloud can enable just one photo going off and having 20, 30 questions answered for you, that customer experience is going to be so much more effective,
That's right.
informative, better, probably more accurate as well. Let's think about how your state of mind is post accident as well. So that is just so fantastic to see, as you say there, the migration to the cloud and just the possibilities it's gonna lead to in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our I was on a call with a vendor the other day, and who happened to be a USAA member, and he said, "I just wanted to tell you something." He said, "I'm up here in the Pennsylvania area, and we had a rare tornado that came through our area back in the fall." And he said, "We were in the middle of it, but I was traveling with my family, and we had not been watching the news at all. We hadn't been listening to the radio or anything like that. So really, had no clue until I got a text message from USAA. These are things that we enable for using big data, using sensor technology, using our knowledge of our customers and those expectations to say, find safety. There's this going on in your area, and that type of thing." And he said we were driving right into it and had no idea, and it's those kind of experiences that differentiate one business from another. And whenever you can deliver those kinds of experiences using whatever technology, any leader will say, "I don't care how you get the technology, just deliver those kind of wow experience in those moments that matter." It's just that we're seeing that more of those experiences are enabled by the big data, AI, machine learning, and cloud.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, in return of investment, is that now that customer is going to be acting safer and not then claiming on their policies. So it
That's
makes
right.
business sense. It's not just, I think, when the temptation to go into innovation and customer experience, it sounds a bit fluffy, but
Right.
actually it makes a real big difference to the bottom line. So
That's
fantastic.
right.
Now, I'm keen to move the conversation on because I can see the clock is ticking away. And I'd love to know from your perspective, what is next for the information management strategy? What do you hope to achieve over the next 12 months?
So much. It's right now we're in the middle of a multi-year journey. There's still a lot of work ahead of us, and it's going to take us a few years to build this plane. But like I said, if you and I are having this conversation a year from now, we should see a lot of our operational data in the cloud and some of our key high volume functionality in the cloud.
Yeah.
For example, if you're in an accident, the ability to tell us that you were in an accident, and you have to have a claim opened. That experience should be seamless to the member, to what it is today. They shouldn't really be able to detect the change, maybe some UI tweaks and so forth, but all of that back end will be happening in the cloud. All of that processing, all of that work is going to be going on in the cloud, without even the customer's awareness. So, and that's what we're going to be talking about a year from now in terms of what to accomplish in the next 12 months. And then going forward, there's going to be our home and property and commercial lines that are going to be going onto the cloud. So there'll be more to talk in those spaces as well. But it's those initial high volume transactions that will be going on first. Yeah.
Awesome. Please excuse me whilst I book you in for this time next year to talk exactly about that. I'll hold you accountable as to
Yeah.
what you're up to. Awesome. Well, I've got one last question for you, Alan. I'm always keen to hear what people's responses are to this question. I'd love to know if you could go back in time, say 5 years, what piece of advice you would give yourself. So, either personally or professionally. What piece of advice would you give yourself?
I'd say, do it sooner, make the decisions faster, get the support earlier. If we had done that earlier, I mean, I think we spent, hindsight's always 2020. It was probably good for us to spend the time that we did to get folks comfortable with the information security type work. But make no mistake, it set us back years, on this journey. And I would much rather have gone through the journey already and be talking with you about lessons learned today. And instead of kind of just where we're at on our journey. But be that as it may, I'd say, this is where the future is going. As one of the great hockey legends, Wayne Gretzky said, when asked about his success, he said, "I just skate to where the puck is going, is going to be." And this is where the puck is going to be. The world is moving to the cloud. Your user experiences will be enabled by the cloud. Machine learning and AI and all of that will be dependent on the cloud to deliver the kind of expectations that you want to have for your customers. So this is where the puck is going. The sooner you get there, the better off you will be.
Fantastic. Well, there we've had it all. We've had hockey, astronauts, and planes all spoken about in this episode. Alan, as always, it's an absolute pleasure chatting.
And gardening.
And gardening, yeah, that was the other one. So I look forward to reading the transcript from this podcast for certain. But Alan, as always, as I say, it is a pleasure catching up with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Catherine.
Wowee, there we go. What a fantastic kickoff to 2021, as well as season 3 for the Business of Data podcast. I hope you really enjoyed that episode, and I just absolutely love catching up with Alan. He's a regular speaker over at the Crinium events side as well, so if you do ever see an event that he's speaking on, make sure you attend. And I'm sure if you've listened this far through to the podcast, I'm sure you'll be in agreement that he is an absolutely fantastic contributor and speaker as well. Now, as always, make sure you're subscribed to the Business of Data platform for lots of fantastic content, and following us on socials as well to make sure you engage with other thought leaders. And if you're following us on one of our brilliant podcast providers, perhaps you're listening on Spotify or Apple or maybe even Google, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well to make sure you catch all of our latest episodes. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast, do reach out to us on the bod@criniumgroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you real soon.